Hello again, everybody. It's Roy here from AstroVentures and the Battlesteads Observatory in Northumberland. We're hosting our second session of the evening, our Masterclass Nightscape Photography session with Dan Monk from Kielder Observatory and Dr. Martin Kitching from Battlesteads Observatory and Northern Experience Wildlife T. What does the T stand for? You muted, Martin. I don't know. Tours, Northern Experience Wildlife Tours. It's not like I've known you for years. Sorry about that. Bit of a mind blank. Anyway, so if you were here for the first session, the beginner session, and you didn't get your question answered, or you're still a little bit confused by anything that we talked about there, that's fine. First of all, that's been recorded and that's now live on the playlist. But secondly, we're going to have a much more longer and more in-depth Q&A, so you can ask your question at the end of that. But if you were in that talk, you're going to be bored for the next 4 minutes because I'm going to do the introduction again for those of you who missed that. So I will share my screen now, that PowerPoint, and I will tell you a little bit about why we're here and what we're going to do and how we are going to do it. And that's not worked. There we go. Right, good. Hopefully you can all see a wonderful picture by Mark McNeil, who's one of our friends over on the West Coast, of that very much photographed sycamore gap tree, also known as the Kevin Costner tree. I don't know how good any of you are at geography, but in that film, he landed in Dover in a ship and then walked across Hadrian's Wall in order to get to Nottingham. So the long way around. But it's beautiful, and I do suggest you get up there if you've never done that before. And that's just one of the wonderful places that we have up here in Northumberland, in addition to the 4 observatories that have come together today and this week to bring this festival to you. We hope to see you when this whole COVID business finishes, whenever that might be. And if you do come and visit, perhaps one of the first places you'll go to is the absolutely wonderful Kielder Observatory that's been around for over a decade now, up near the village of Kielder. And that's a fantastic picture by Dan just there of the observatory. You've got Stonehoff Astronomy, which if you want to look for Stonehoff Astronomy, they've got a page on Facebook under that name, and that's run by Liam Reed, who also is employed by Kielder Observatory. So best of both worlds there with Liam. And that's a picture there, and what you can see there is the pavilion, the Stonehoff Stargazing Pavilion. He's just built a / observatory warm room there as well. So that's fantastic. One of our other partners in the festival is the Twice Brewed Observatory up at the Twice Brewed Inn, which is right next door to the Sill. And the Sill is the main visitor centre now, the discovery centre, if you like, for the Northumberland National Park. And actually, if you're going to go and visit Sycamore Gap, the Kevin Costner tree, that's where you want to park up and kind of walk up from in an ideal world. And that's the view out of the roof of their observatory. And last, but by no means least, the observatory that 5 or 6 years ago I helped design and build, the Battlesteads Observatory in the village of Wark, where Martin is one of our lead astronomers and a director also as well. And actually, that's one of Martin's pictures there. There's a lot going on in that picture. It always amazes me what's going on in these dark sky nightscape pictures that you folks take. As you are aware, and you will already see the YouTube chat, the live chat is going, and we've got a load of experts in there already. I want to say thank you to Rachel. There's Robert, who was answering questions before. Chris, one of our colleagues, Chris Duffy, who is the chairperson of Southern Astro, and also the actual manager and the director of the observatory, the Battlesteads Observatory. He's been answering questions as well. So do ask away, and if there are any questions that are too technical, then Dan and Martin will get to them at the end. And I'll ask you to all please be kind in your comments, or I'll put you on the naughty step in the YouTube chat. The point of Dark Sky Festivals is to highlight 2 things. One, just the fact that we can do astronomy wherever we are. But the second thing is that dark skies are really vital and wonderful places that need to be protected and preserved. And to that end, we all tend to be members of or delegates for the International Dark Sky Association. And you know what? You can join. You can join as a member. You can look at local groups and chapters. And so I wholeheartedly encourage you to get yourself across to the IDA website and look at how you can join, how you can get involved, and perhaps how you can donate to their charitable cause of dark skies. Thank you for listening to me. I'm going to mute myself and turn off my camera and hand you over to our speakers for the evening. I can't remember which one of you is speaking first, but folks, Dan, Martin, it's over to you. And that, by the way, is your cue for one of you to start talking.
Yeah.
While
I'll just go on to share screen and I'll let Dan introduce himself before I do the first part of the talk.
Yeah,
okay, great stuff.
Myself, yeah. My name is Dan Monk. I work at Kielder Observatory. One of the astronomers there. I am the director of the Gillian Dickinson Astro Imaging Academy, which is our newest observatory at Kielder, and it houses some nice big fancy telescopes and nice fancy cameras to take deep sky images. Along with that, I also run public events at Kielder Observatory with the team of astronomers that we have working up there.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Martin Kitching. I'm one of Roy's fellow directors of AstroVentures and the Battlesteads Observatory, which we've been open to the public now. I say just over 5 years. We've been closed for most of the last year for obvious and unfortunate reasons. I also run a company called Northern Experience Wildlife Tours, does exactly what it says on the tin. So I'm going to start this session talking a bit about planning and talking a bit about trying to find the bit of paper where I wrote down who's doing which section. Dan will keep me right if I forget, I think.
Well, I haven't written it down. I'm just winging it.
Yeah, right. So we'll start off. Planning a nightscape shoot is actually really very important. The weather forecast that we tend to use at the Battlesteads now is called Clear Outside, and Clear Outside is a weather forecast website specifically for astronomy and stargazing. It was set up by First Light Optics, who are an optics supplier down in Exeter, and it has lots of useful information. It doesn't just tell you what the weather's going to be doing, it gives you percentages of high, low, and medium cloud. And if you've got 100% low cloud forecast, you probably need to stay at home. You're going to have something that you can't see through, you won't be able to photograph through. Low cloud is usually very, very dense and a real issue for either observational or photographic astronomy. It then has medium cloud. Medium cloud is sometimes okay, sometimes not. And it also has a forecast for high cloud. And if you've got a forecast that has cloud and it's all high cloud only, I would say don't worry too much about that. If it's 100% high cloud, it might be annoying because you might have a nice haze over the sky. But often with high cloud, you can see through it. It's often very thin. Don't be completely downhearted if you've got a cloud forecast, if it is all high cloud. Sat24 is another website, shows you cloud cover, so you can see where the cloud's coming from, whether or not it's likely to just come and sit directly above you. You probably find that after you watch the cloud for a little while, everywhere will be clear except for directly over your head. That's just the way these things tend to happen. And the spaceweather.com website, it's a constant discussion I have with one of my fellow directors about things like the Aurora, whether the Aurora is astronomy or not. And one of my fellow directors argues that the Aurora, in fact, is weather and it's not astronomy. But spaceweather.com gives you an idea of whether or not you're likely to have visible Aurora through the summer. It'll let you know if you're going to have a possibility of seeing noctilucent cloud, which in the image on the right there, those are those fine silvery blue clouds. Those are noctilucent clouds, which we see for a few weeks either side of midsummer. If you live this far north or even further north, you'll be aware we don't get much darkness through the middle of the summer. So noctilucent cloud is at least something to go and look for. Knowing what's in each direction in the sky before you go out to start taking your photographs is obviously a useful thing to do. And one program which we use a lot at the Battlesteads, and in fact almost everybody I know now uses, is called Stellarium. And Stellarium is a planetarium program for your PC. It's free software, it's excellent, fantastic. You can put in your location and you can drag the screen around, which will show you the view of the sky in different directions from where you are. You can also input the sensor size for your camera and the lens that you're using, and whichever direction you're pointing in, it puts a little rectangle across the sky showing the exact field of view that you're going to have on that sensor. Again, incredibly good for planning. So if you can look at what camera you're using, what lens you're using, input them, and it'll show you exactly how much of the sky is going to be captured during that exposure. The Photographer's Ephemeris is another very useful website, and it's a sun, moon, and Milky Way calculator. And it shows you where the sun and the moon are rising and setting. It shows you where they are going to be throughout the day from your position. And it also shows you where the Milky Way is going to be. And something that we're going to talk about is the Milky Way, and how it's not the same right throughout the year, and how knowing exactly where it is quite important if that's what you're trying to photograph. Mobile Observatory is a very good app. That one does exactly what it says. It has a huge amount of information in it, including what's visible from your location on that night, information about the moonrise, moonset, the phase of the moon, etc. Planning is actually, I was going to say planning is critical. Sometimes things don't work out the way you want to do, even if you've planned them very, very carefully. That Aurora photograph on the right there, that was taken at 10:30 at night in early December during a supermoon. And the beach was illuminated to the point where I could almost see people a mile away walking on the beach at night. Sometimes everything just seems to conspire against us. Probably the most critical thing of all is where to go. It's incredibly important to realize your camera sensor is far, far more sensitive to light than your eyes are. You could be in an area that you think is nice and dark, and your camera sensor, if there is any light pollution there at all, your camera sensor will pick it up. Maps of light pollution really are maps of population density, where there are people, where there's industry, there's light. Get away from those areas. Certainly if you're doing wide field nightscape photography, light pollution is an absolute menace. You want to be as far away from it as you possibly can. Here in the Northeast, we're incredibly lucky that our population is really crammed into Southeast Northumberland, Newcastle, Gateshead, Sunderland, Teesside. The rest of the Northeast, to all intents and purposes, is uninhabited, so there's very little light pollution. Kielder Observatory, very, very low levels of light pollution. The Battlesteads, again, very good dark sky. As long as there aren't people there, you'll be absolutely fine. And in fact, one thing which I'd not put in at the end of this presentation, which I probably should, if you're going out trying to photograph something like the Aurora, my absolute top tip is don't go where there are other people. Anybody who's in the Northeast will probably be very familiar with Whitley Bay and St. Mary's Island. If you go there trying to see the Aurora, you're going to go into a car park which is full of people who've got their headlights on and have got head torches on, and they're going to mangle your night vision. You might photograph the Aurora, you won't see it. Try to find somewhere nice and dark. Obviously check things like tide times, but beaches are very good. You generally don't find lots of people on a beach in the middle of the night. There are also things called dark sky discovery sites, and there's a whole network of these throughout the country. And you go onto the Dark Sky Discovery Site website, and it tells you where they are. It shows you a map with all the little dots on, and if you click on a dot, it'll tell you what the sky quality is in that location. It'll tell you if they have events there. It'll tell you what amenities are nearby. The other thing you can do with your planning, and I showed you that Aurora photograph with a big supermoon, which was really messing with the sky. Can you be creative with what you're going to have in the sky in front of your lens? If it's a big bright moon, if it's nice and hazy and misty, you can use that to your advantage. This is still photographing the night sky, and the photograph there is a big bright moon and some very, very hazy high cloud behind trees. Bare branches are great. Get lots of really nice graphic images doing that. Visit the location where you're planning to take your photographs in daylight. You don't want to go somewhere for the first time at night. There'll be tripping hazards, fences, walls, things that could really ruin your day. Make sure you're very familiar with the location you're going to in daylight. That'll also give you an idea of how to set up different compositions. So what are you going to put in the foreground of your frame? And I would shoot daylight landscapes. Once you've found a location where you want to take photographs of the night sky, shoot lots of daylight landscapes there, but with loads of sky in them. Get lots and lots of sky. It doesn't matter if it's the middle of the day and the sky's quite featureless, because when you're shooting at night, you're going to put more sky in your image than you are foreground generally. So shoot those daylight landscapes, get lots of sky in there, and it'll give you an idea of what you can put in the foreground at night. So I thought I would do a little bit on composition as well. So you've got your location, you're there in daylight, you can see what's there. Most of you will have heard of the rule of thirds. I don't think I've ever come across a photographer who hasn't heard of the rule of thirds, or the vaguely useful suggestion of thirds. It's not a rule. And the way our eyes work, you naturally gravitate towards looking at those intersections of the thirds in an image anyway. And you will probably just put them there subconsciously when you're setting up a photograph. In a nightscape, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of detail right down to a flat horizon. So you can take something here like Lindisfarne Castle, stick it right in the middle of the photograph. If you're doing this in daylight and you'd got a really interesting sky, you would probably put the castle off to one side or the other, going along this rule of thirds idea. At night, that doesn't necessarily work. You can just end up with a lot of flat, featureless space that you really don't want to be photographing. Try to find some sort of foreground interest. Occasionally, it's good to just point your camera straight up at the sky and photograph what's there. If you've got some sort of foreground interest, that'll hold people's attention a bit longer. And I teach daytime landscape photography and have done for several years now. And one thing I always say is a good photograph will hold somebody's attention. Their eyes will linger on that photograph just a second or two longer than they otherwise would. And it's putting something there that will keep people's attention, that makes a good photograph. Buildings, people. So in fact, here I've got buildings and people. If any of you have ever been to the Battlesteads Observatory when I've been leading an event, you'll recognize that ridiculously large bobble on top of that bobble hat. That's my big black and yellow hat. Even hills, you can have in the way a lot of Dan's photographs along Hadrian's Wall and the Tyne Gap. You've got a nice rolling, sometimes quite dramatic landscape of hills in the lower part of the frame. And a great landscape in daylight doesn't necessarily translate to a great nightscape, and vice versa. This is a holiday cottage that I stayed in Ardnamurchan a few years ago. This was the 4th ever photograph I took with my Nikon D810, which is still my main landscape and nightscape camera now. That's the cottage we were staying in. It was a nice clear night, and I just thought, I'll just point my lens to the north and see if there's anything there. There was no visible aurora. There was no particularly good aurora forecast. And there was a nice green and pink sky. So you just never know. It would be an absolutely dismal photograph in daylight. It's 3/4 of a cottage and a telephone wire. Wouldn't be interesting at all. So I'm going to hand over to Dan now to talk about photographing the Milky Way.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Martin. So we've, like Martin said there, we touched on planning and composition. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to chat to you a little bit about the kind of things you can take photographs of in the night sky. So we'll do things like Milky Way. We'll chat a little bit about shooting stars, how to capture them, although they're mainly luck, to be honest, and also how to capture things like star trails and time lapses as well. So we're going to go through some of that with you now. We're going to start with the Milky Way. And you can see here one of Martin's lovely images of the Milky Way, and he's written down there time of year, direction of the core, and angle from the horizon. So those three things are kind of things we're going to touch on next, and we're going to chat a little bit about how the Milky Way changes throughout the year, because you can come up with all sorts of interesting shots of the Milky Way because its angle does change. We see different parts of it in different times of year. So as the Earth orbits the sun, we see a different part of the Milky Way. So different seasons give you different Milky Ways. So we normally refer to them as the summer Milky Way, the winter Milky Way, the spring and autumn Milky Way as well. So you've got lots of different views of it, which I think is really good because it gives you lots of different variety. So we're going to go through some of the images. Actually, Martin, it's your slideshow, so I'll let you go forward for me to the next slide. And what I've done is I've put together a few different images from different seasons, just to show you the kind of views you can get. Okay. Now this one here is the summer Milky Way. Now I must point out, first of all, if you do live in Northumberland, or you are as far north as what we are at Kielder, the sky around the summer solstice doesn't get fully dark. So we have a period of maybe a month or so where we don't get really, really dark skies, and it is difficult to pick out the Milky Way. You can just about pick it out, but usually there's a lot of twilight going on, so you can't really get an amazing view of it. But annoyingly, the Milky Way tends to be the best in the summertime. People like the Milky Way in the summer. That's because we see the galactic center or the galactic core. So this picture here I took in the summertime. I took it in South Wales, where it is a little bit darker than it is at Kielder. And I took this about 2-3 years ago now. And yes, that's me down on the beach in the little deck chairs down there. The camera was on a timer, so I wasn't there clicking the button. I was down sitting on the deck chair. But this is my favorite part of the Milky Way. I love this. You can really see a lot of detail. You get a lot of color. You can see there's oranges coming through. You might even see a few little pink bits as well, which are gas clouds in the core of our galaxy. I just think it's dramatic. It's impressive. And summertime really is the time to catch it. From Northumberland, I normally say around about kind of early May, late May time, late in the night you see it. And then as the dark skies start coming back in late July, in early August, you can get a chance to see it as well. It is low on our horizons, it's not easy to get, but the galactic core is a beautiful, beautiful sight, and it's a beautiful thing to take images of. In fact, so much so that myself and two of my colleagues, the other Dan and Adam, we went down to Tenerife back in 2019 to image the galactic core because it's so beautiful, and the further south you go, the better that part of the Milky Way looks. So
I'll interrupt you.
Yeah, go for it.
It's a question that I don't want to leave until the end because it's relevant to these pictures that you're taking. Yeah. Someone has said that where possible, if you can remember, both of you, when you're showing pictures, is there any chance you can tell people roughly what the settings were for those pictures, please?
Yeah, that's no problem at all.
Martin, you're muted.
I am. We've got half a dozen images at the end.
I'm
going to talk about how we took them, and we've actually got all of the settings on screen.
Yeah,
there you go. So that answers your question, John Rain, and I shall mute myself again. Thank you for letting me interrupt you, Dan.
So what I can do is I will talk to you. I will mention what I've done with these ones just quickly, because this one's actually a stacked image. So going from, I don't remember the settings, but going from what we mentioned in the first one, if you were with us in the beginner session, we did talk a little bit about stacking images, and by stacking images, you reduce the noise and you get more detail. And this one is using one of those stacking softwares where it separates the sky from the horizon. So this is a This is almost like a time lapse that I've taken of many, many images, and I have stacked them using some software. But we'll talk about settings and things a little bit later on if you like. So that's the summertime. We'll move to the next one, please, Martin. We'll go to what's after summer? Autumn. That's it, isn't it? I quite like the autumn Milky Way, because when we get to autumn time, we don't see so much of the galactic center, but we do see a part of the Milky Way, which I love, and is actually very high in the sky. I think we'll get some really good views of it. It's what we call the Cygnus region of the Milky Way. I'll just keep talking until Martin changes the slide, and I'm going to show you what it looks like from Kielder Observatory.
Yeah, I'm trying to change it now, Dan. For some reason, it's refusing to.
No problem. But yeah, the next image I might as well mention while we wait for it is also another stacked image. I took it from the dark skies of Kielder. I took many shots of it, and I've stacked them together. Okay, this one was a little bit easier for stacking because I didn't put a foreground in it. I just literally pointed the camera towards above my head, because that's where the Milky Way is in autumn time. The Cygnus region is really high up, and we see it right overhead.
So Dan, people are asking about star trackers, and basically if you're doing stacking, does that mean you need a tracker? And I think that my answer to that would be, I think it's both. You can use a tracker, you can use a stacking, whether you use a tracker or not. But what do you think?
Yeah, you can. So you don't have to use a star tracker to stack. If I'm not using my star tracker, sometimes if I'm traveling light and I don't have all my equipment with me, I'll normally leave the star tracker at home. What I normally do is I normally take very short exposures, so I don't get much star trailing, and I use a very high ISO. When I say high ISO, I mean, I'm talking something like, sometimes I'll go up to 8,000 or 10,000, which is pretty high, but that really depends on what camera you're using as well. If you're using a fairly basic camera, ISO 10,000 would be quite high.
Yeah.
My ISO goes up to something like, I can't remember, like
500,000 on the Sony's, 450,000.
Something like that, yeah. So what I do is I use a very high ISO, I use a short exposure of maybe only 5 to 10 seconds, and then I stack them, and I take as many as I can. And the good thing about doing a short exposure is, if you're only doing 5 seconds at a high ISO, you can take many shots in a short period of time. If you just keep clicking away for 10 minutes, taking 5-10 second exposures one after another, you then have loads and loads of pictures to stack together. Yeah, and that's the way I get around not using a star tracker. I do prefer using a star tracker, but using star trackers and using with a foreground, it gets more complicated, because you've got to then composite the image. So you've got to track the sky, take pictures, then take a picture of the foreground, and then merge them together. It is good, and you get really nice results from doing that. But I quite like just doing a landscape shot without a tracker and taking short exposures, and then using certain software to stack the sky only. That's a nice way of doing it.
The conversation is going on in the YouTube chat about that as well. Actually, a couple of people are chipping in, and Edward Bayliss, who has asked these questions, has also said he wants to meet other photographers in Northumberland. And Edward, I'm just going to say, when we're open again, come and see us, and go and see Kielder, go and see Twice Brewed, go and see Liam. We're all photographers. We'll all go out
for a session. We'll all go out together, all of us.
Yeah, that'd be great.
A camera session. Yeah.
Quick question: can you do this with a CMOS and small refractor? I'm kind of thinking probably not, but maybe.
Are you talking about the Milky Way?
I think so. I think it must be, because that question came on roughly when these pictures started. That's a question from just a few minutes ago. I mainly do DSO imaging with a CMOS and small refractor. The field of view is quite small. Could I hook up anything to the CMOS for a decent nightscape?
Where's Martin gone? Martin's gone.
Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I guess it depends on what attachment you have for your CMOS sensor. Can you attach? I think you can attach lenses to them if you want. It depends on what camera you're using. But you could potentially attach a wider field lens. It depends on what the focal length of your refractor is as well. If you've got a very, very small refractor of only something like maybe 100 mil or 150 mil, you could potentially do a very, very high resolution mosaic of the Milky Way if you wanted to. That would take quite a lot of work, doing mosaics and stitching them all together, and that's quite a lot of effort. Yeah. But it just depends on what camera you have. I'm not quite sure what you're using, but you can attach wide field.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting when you were talking about the vignetting thing. I've bought myself a little, I don't know where I've put it actually, but a little adapter I can put on the front of my Sony. It's got a 55mm screw thing. I bought it from China for £12, and
Yeah.
it opens up my field of view. It pops a bit of vignetting in, but as we all keep saying, with all the clouds and the misery we're having, I'm yet to use my camera in earnest.
That's the way it is. Yeah, I got a new lens about a month back, and I got the first clear night a few nights ago. It's always the way it works when you get new equipment. It's cloudy for a long time.
Martin's having internet problems.
Are there any more questions while we're for Martin?
Yeah, I'm just sending Martin the because he can join the Zoom certainly. I'm looking. I've got it streaming on here, and it's fine. T adapter. Someone's saying, can we use a T adapter with an SLR lens? I don't. So I think T adapters are more towards putting in telescopes, aren't they?
Telescopes and DSLRs. Yeah. So you use a T adapter screws into the camera of the camera body, and then you attach the T adapter to the telescope.
Yeah.
So
I think so. I mean, I was looking at this. I don't know if you can see that. Chris Duffy's got one of those. It's the Zenith Star 61-2 APO.
Yeah.
I was thinking of getting that instead of the lenses I'm talking about for the telephoto, but that's 360mm. So that's not a Nightscape photography lens, I think, is it?
I can get I've got a T adapter here. Just give me a sec. I'm going to disappear. So this is my camera, Canon camera, and a T adapter, just like this here, slots in.
Yeah, you're going to have to hold them in front of you. If you hold them in front of the background, they kind of vanish. You become half invisible, which is weird.
Of course, I can't get it. Let me just put it on first, and then I'll hold it up.
Yeah. Martin Kitchen, Dr. Martin Kitchen is having to reboot his computer because it's completely frozen. So he'll be back in a minute.
Actually, what I might have is, if you want, I think I might have his talk on my computer because he sent me it over. Shall I have a quick look to see if I can get it? Continue on or not? No?
No, it's fine. He'll be back in a couple of minutes. There are loads of questions, actually, Dan, happening in the chat.
Yeah.
We've got Larry Bedigan, Chris Duffy, and Rachel are all doing fantastic jobs of answering various things. So someone has said that with the ZWO cameras, you can get an attachment to attach a Canon lens. Now, I didn't know that, so that's interesting.
Yeah, with ZWOs, yeah, you can, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and Larry said the same thing as well. With wide-angle lenses, you can attach them to the CMOS sensor. So that's interesting. Jose Augustine wants to know what your salary is. So, Jose, I don't think we're not going to tell you that, I'm afraid. We don't do it for the money. We do it for the love of astronomy. Astromechanics make an adapter. I'll tell you what I'm interested in, Dan. If you could talk a little bit, a lot of your pictures that you've taken recently, I think these are maybe just the one-shot ones with your DSLR. Some of the really brighter stars in the constellations, like your Orion one, they really pop out quite unnaturally, actually. It's a beautiful effect. It's lovely and artistic. Can you tell us how you achieve that?
Of course, yeah. I know that you're very interested in this because you want one now, don't you, as well?
I do, but I mean, there are people out there who might not know, so I'm posing that question as a newbie.
Of course. So we've a lot of my recent images are using a fog filter. So I normally use this when I'm not imaging the Milky Way. So the Milky Way is such a lovely feature in your night sky shots. You know, it's an amazing thing to image. But sometimes when the Milky Way isn't there, so if you're imaging a patch of the sky where there's maybe not so many stars, for example, in the springtime, when you look towards Pegasus and Pisces and Cetus and all these constellations, they're quite faint and there's not really much going on. I like to use a fog filter. And what the fog filter does is it enhances the brightest stars that you can see in the image. So it blows them up a little bit so you can kind of get a better view of it, if you like. So I did have a shot of Orion on the last talk. It was on at the very end where you saw me lying down in the snow, and you could really see the stars in Orion really well. And that's what I like about it. It just enhances them and it makes them pop and makes them stand out. It also enhances the color of the stars as well. So you can actually see the difference between orange and blue stars when you enhance the stars.
Cool. We have Martin back, which is great. So that's a fog filter. I have noticed with those, by the way, and welcome back, Martin. My Richard made the impression. Welcome back. I have noticed that you can get like fog, double fog, triple fog filters. Do you just go for the normal basic level one?
I've got the double fog filter. So it's just
Okay.
it's just about the strength. That's all. So if you want more of it, if you want more of a subtle effect, you'd go for a. I'm not sure which ones they do, but you know, you can go for kind of 1 strength, 2 strength, 3 strength, and this will this will change the strength of the fogging, if you like. So if you saw my fog filter, actually I've got one coming up shortly. I'll show you what I mean with a fog filter.
Which is great. Now the other thing as well is people are asking about light pollution filters, and Chris Duffy and I think Larry are also talking about UHC, ultra high contrast filters for light pollution. And obviously a couple of people talking about how LED lights are now de rigueur. It's not the sodium lamps anymore. So instead of, whereas light pollution used to be just having to block out that sodium glare, you now have to do a lot more. They have to do a lot more work.
It's actually more of an issue now with LED lights. Yeah, it is.
I mean, overall, light pollution is better because there's less light going up in the sky. But photography, the light that you're going up is across the whole spectrum now. So it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Would a neutral density filter do the same as a fog filter? Yes or no?
No.
So no, Martin, no, it wouldn't. Get a fog filter. Tiffin do good ones, Tiffen, but they only do ones that fit on the lens. Whereas I think in an ideal world, if you can get a filter that will clip into the body of the camera, you know, right in front of the sensor, they're better because you get like less interference and less problems with internal reflections and problems in your lens.
I'll also plug Alan Wallace's filter as well, if anyone follows Alan Wallace.
Is that any good? Because
I haven't used it, but it looks good. The good thing about it is that it's a filter that goes on the end, and it's not a specific size. It's one of the square filters that you put in the end of the.
Oh yeah. So you buy an adapter, don't you, for the front of your lens, and then the square filters are fairly ubiquitous. Do you know what? If you want to drop a link into the Zoom chat, I'll copy for that one. I'll copy that into the YouTube channel, because I also know when we were talking about star trackers, the MSM, the Move, Shoot, Move, Rotator star tracker are offering all of our viewers a discount, and I've got a code there if you want to buy that star tracker, so I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I think we have Martin back and the video is working. Welcome back, Martin, and I shall once again mute myself. And
excellent. Right, I'll carry on then. So we're just chatting about the Milky Way in different angles, and the next slide, if you want to go to the next one, Martin, we'll look at the winter Milky Way. And this is actually where I've used a fog filter, so you can really see the difference now with the stars. The winter Milky Way is really nice, but it's nowhere near as prominent as other parts of the Milky Way. So I'm talking about the part of the Milky Way that runs down through Auriga, through Gemini, through Canis Minor, down by the left-hand side of Orion as well. You can all see Orion right at the center of the image, and you can see that faint band of light up towards the top left of Orion. So that's the winter Milky Way. It's nice, but like I say, I like to use that fog filter just to enhance the stars, and you see the different colors, especially between Betelgeuse and Rigel, which are 2 stars in Orion. You can see the top left-hand side star is orange, and the bottom right-hand star is a beautiful bluish color as well. So I quite like that effect, if anyone's into that. It's pretty nice. And then the next Milky Way is the spring Milky Way. Now the spring Milky Way, again, I've actually used the fog filter for this just to enhance some of the stars. And this one is a little bit different. It's a panorama. And the reason I've done this is because the Milky Way is quite low down in the springtime. It's kind of almost parallel to the eastern horizon. So it stretches from horizon to horizon, but it's low down in the sky. So it's actually a really good opportunity to take a panorama like this, because it's so low down in the sky. You can set your camera up and you can take multiple images side by side. We'll get a little bit more into panoramas shortly, but I just wanted to show you the view of the Milky Way we get in the springtime. We see a little bit of Cygnus, we see a little bit of Cassiopeia low to the horizon. And then we'll move on to the next one. And how you can find or work out where the Milky Way is going to be. This is stuff that Martin has already covered, really. But things like Stellarium and the Photographer's Ephemeris, these are really good ways of working out where the Milky Way is going to be. So when you're planning your Milky Way shots, just go onto Stellarium, put in the date and time, so you can see what the sky looks like from your location, and you can see what angle the Milky Way is going to be like. That's a really good way of planning your shot, planning your foreground, where you're going to go, what time you need to take your image, and all those sorts of things. So make sure that you do a bit of planning as well. This is quite good just to mention with different cameras as well. I don't know how much you went into it earlier on, Martin, with different camera sensor sizes, but the full frame cameras are the kind of largest, not quite the largest, but they're the largest sensors you get in DSLRs, and they are going to catch a lot more sky. So by having a full frame sensor, you don't actually need to have a super wide lens to catch a lot of the Milky Way. You can have something along the lines of 35 millimeters all the way down to 14 millimeters, 10 millimeters. In fact, I've got an 8 millimeter lens, which is like a fisheye, almost like a fisheye lens, which captures nearly all of the sky. So 35 mm and below is good for full frame. If you're using a crop sensor, so crop sensor cameras are normally entry-level DSLR cameras, you won't fit as much sky in with a crop sensor, so you will need to use a wider lens. So anything from 24 mm all the way down to maybe 10 mil is good. And if you're using a micro four thirds sensor, 18 mil is about what you want, and lower than 18 mil will give you a nice wide view of the Milky Way. Okay, shooting stars. I love shooting stars, and I mentioned earlier on that you can't predict when a shooting star is going to appear. You just can't. They're very difficult to catch. So whenever you're trying to do any shooting star images, or if you're out for a meteor showers, you're going to improve your chances of catching something if you're out on a meteor shower night, especially if you go out for the Geminids, or if you go out for the Perseids in August. These showers produce zenithal hourly rates of over 100 per hour. Doesn't mean you're going to see that many, but you're going to have a really good chance of catching some. And my advice whenever you're shooting or imaging shooting stars is you just keep the camera on all night. Just leave it on a tripod, take your images one after another continuously, just keep on going. I actually just leave mine on continuous shooting mode, and I just leave it going all night, and for as long as my battery holds up. This is when you need to use batteries and extra batteries. It's when you need to use things like dew heaters, which you mentioned earlier, to make sure your lens doesn't fog up. And the longer you leave it, then the more chance you've got of catching shooting stars. We've all been there before, astrophotographers, where we think we've caught a shooting star and we go, oh, how exciting. Let's run to the camera. Let's go and check. Let's see if we've managed to catch that shooting star. You turn the camera off, you look at the back of your screen, and you're looking for the shooting star. Then all of a sudden, a great big fireball appears right through your shot, but your camera's turned off because you're looking at your image. So don't do that. Wait till the end of the night, then get all your images on the PC and have a look through them, and then see if you've caught any. But it is very tempting to do that whenever you think you've caught one.
Yeah, I'll just back up what Dan's saying there. That's looking at your images on the back of the camera is a behavior called chimping.
Chimping, yeah.
Don't do it. Just don't. I've had similar during daylight with a client when I found an osprey and we could see it very distantly, and he took some photographs while this bird was 1.5 miles away, and I was watching it through the binoculars and telling him where it was coming, and at the point when it went over the car carrying a headless trout in the torpedo position, I couldn't hear his camera shutter, and I turned around and he was chimping the shots when it was 1 mile away. He missed what would have been an award-winning photograph.
It's not good.
You can always look at your images later, but the moment that you're capturing only happens once. Don't ever forget that.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll move on to the next one because it's in relation to meteor showers. You'll have hopefully read a bit of the text there about shooting away from the radiant. I'll talk about what the radiant is now. There's the famous tree again. As you'll see, I do quite like this this spot. This is a shot I took back in 2018, and it was during the Geminid meteor shower. So it was on the night of the 13th of December, and we had a good night that year because it was moonless, and when it's moonless, you have a dark sky. And I had the camera set up there for three and a half hours, just on the tripod, just taking pictures, looking towards the tree. And you can see that I've caught different shooting stars throughout the course of the night. Now, this is not one picture, this is a composite image. So what I've done is I've selected the images where I've got the shooting stars, and I photoshopped them in, essentially is what I've done. So this is a bit of a cheating image, but it's a really good way of demonstrating the radiant of a meteor shower. You can see how they're all traveling in the same direction. All the meteors appear to be traveling from the top right of the image down to the bottom left. They're all going roughly the same way. And that's because when you watch a meteor shower, all of the shooting stars radiate from a single point in the sky, which is called the radiant. This one radiates from Gemini, which is why we call it the Geminid meteor shower. And it's all right, Martin, don't worry. And just off the left of the image, when it comes back on, sorry, just off the right of the image even, where the meteors appear to be coming from, that's where Gemini is. Gemini is just off the screen. So I've purposely done that because if you move further away from the radiant where they appear to be coming from, the trails appear to be longer. I've also done it because I wanted to point towards the tree as well, just to make the image pretty. But if you're pointing towards the radiant with your camera, then the shooting stars are going to look very short. That's because they're traveling towards your face, they're traveling towards your eyes, so you're not really going to get to see the length of them. Whereas if you pan your camera away from the radiant, the shooting stars will be traveling past you rather than towards you. So you'll see the side-on view of the shooting stars, and that's when you get that longer trail. So I tend to try and point away from the radiant, unless if you're going to do a special shot where you point towards the radiant with a wide lens and you want to get that effect of them all moving away from a certain point. But it's just a good little tip. And also get as many cameras out as you can. That's kind of my way of doing it. I have two cameras, so I set up my two cameras. I also borrow a few cameras from the observatory as well. And I try and cover as much of the sky as I can when I'm shooting the meteor shower, just so I don't miss anything. But you always miss something. If you've got 5 cameras on the go, there'll be a beautiful shooting star that goes right in between the two shots. So we'll move on. I'm going to just chat about satellites. Martin's got this cool picture for me there from Battlesteads of the International Space Station. You can see there's a very solid line there. Now, shooting stars are always mistaken for satellites. Satellites mistaken for shooting stars even. There are a lot of satellites up there now. I think there's like over 6,000 or 7,000 satellites in space. And if you're imaging, especially if you're imaging maybe 2 or 3 hours after sunset or 2 hours before sunrise, you get a lot of satellites in your images. And that's because the sun is at a perfect angle to illuminate them. So you pick them up quite a lot. When I was at Sycamore Gap a few nights ago, I was imaging as soon as it got dark because I wanted to get home because it was freezing cold, saying minus 10 or something. So I imaged as soon as it got dark, but all of my images, pretty much every one of them, had a satellite in them because it was that time of night. The deeper into the night you get, you won't get as many satellites in your images, but they're still around, you'll still see some. So usually satellites tend to be more of a thick, solid line. Whereas if you look at Martin's image in the background there, in between the writing, you can see that meteor kind of has more of a tapered line and it's kind of broken up slightly. So meteors tend to look more irregular, whereas a satellite tends to be more of a solid, thick line. So try not to mistake them for satellites. But on the topic of satellites, the International Space Station is a great thing to image. You can use all sorts of apps, websites, which tell you when the space station is going to pass over from your location. So it's really good to download them. It'll give you alerts and things, and it tells you when it's going to come over. You get your camera ready, point it towards where the space station is going to be, and then you can catch it passing overhead. We'll move on. Okay, star trails. Star trails, I love star trails. They're a really good thing to do. And I always think in the case of star trails, the longer you do it, the better it is, usually. So we've got one of Martin's here from Battlesteads. How long was this, Martin? I'm going to say 40 minutes, an hour. Do you not remember? You're muted. 1 hour. 1 hour it was. Fantastic. So this is where we capture that motion that we didn't want to capture earlier on. So if you were here with us in the beginners session, I talked about sausage stars and that we didn't want those trailing stars because we want to have sharp stars. But if you want star trails, then sausage stars are good. There's nothing wrong with them. And the way you do a star trail is by taking multiple images. So you just take image after image, a little bit like what I mentioned earlier with the shooting stars. I just leave the camera taking shot after shot after shot all night. And if you do that, you can also put them together into a star trail. You can merge them together using free software like Star Trails or Star Stacks, which is quite a good one. I just use Photoshop, so there's no reason why you couldn't use GIMP to do it as well. But I load them all in Photoshop and I just merge them together into a star trail. And you get yeah, go for it.
I'll say a little bit about how this particular image was done.
Go for it.
This was using an Olympus EM1 Mark II, which has a function called Live Composite. And the Live Composite functions on Olympus cameras, when you set your base exposure for the foreground, it takes the first shot for however long you've told it to. And then it takes the second shot, and all it does is look for any highlight that's different, and it adds it into the original image. So you don't, that's an hour's exposure, but it's not burnt out the foreground at all, because it's just taken the initial exposure of that. Nothing changes in the second frame with the observatory building, so it just leaves it where it is, and it then adds in any highlight that changed. So that was an hour. I literally pressed the shutter button to start it, and an hour later, pressed the shutter button to stop it, and it had just stacked the whole thing in camera while it was going.
I'm pretty sure that's what the Huawei phone does as well, actually. And I was going to kind of butt in on your presentation here a little bit and just try and pull out one of my mobile phone star trail shots. They're not as good as these by any stretch of the imagination, but they're there for people if they want to try them. I can't find one. I'll see if I can find one later in the conversation.
Yeah.
But that sounds like a very similar technology anyway.
Well, we'll move on to the next one. But under the next one, you've just mentioned that one about that's it, right? So I put this one in from Kielder because I always think star trails I always say they're two for price of one, really, because you can do a time lapse and you can do a star trail with the same stuff. So on the left-hand side, I've got a time lapse from Kielder Observatory, and this one was for around about, if I remember correctly, about 2 hours. It was for. So I left the camera going for 2 hours, and I've been able to put a time lapse together so you can watch the motion of the stars.
Is that running backwards?
It's going forwards and backwards. Can you able to play it again? Is that all right? It should be on a loop, but maybe it's messed up for some reason.
No, it's okay, because I mean, Kielder, the observatory points due north, doesn't it? So that's the setting.
So,
yeah, okay.
So it's going forwards in time, then it'll go backwards. I had it on a loop, but it mustn't be working on PowerPoint.
No, that's cool. I love it.
But I've also used those same images and put them together as a star trail. So you can see on the right-hand side there, you get two for the price of one, which I think is really good for that. So you can make a video and you can make a lovely star trail as well. One thing I will say about this one, even though it's my shot, I'm actually not a big fan of this star trail because there are just so many stars. I sometimes find that doing star trails in more of a light polluted area can be better in a way. Because I feel like this one here, because it's taken from Kielder where the sky is very dark, there's just so much going on. There's so many stars. You can't really kind of work out what's going on. I feel like it looks a bit messy in a way. And that's why I sometimes think doing star trails on a moonlit night is actually really good. Moon nights are good for star trails because the moon illuminates your foreground. So it gives you a nice bright foreground so you can see what's going on. And it also dims down some of the fainter stars in the sky, and by doing that, the star trails don't look as crazy, and there doesn't look as many of them. And I quite like that effect. So it depends on what you want to go for. Star trails are good to do on moonlit nights. If it's moonlit and you're thinking, oh, the Milky Way is not out, it's not very good, then maybe do a star trail. It's a good chance to do that. Next one.
I found my mobile phone star trail pictures, so I'll happily chuck it in at the end.
No problem. And I wanted to mention panoramas as well. Panoramas are really nice things to do. Like I said, in the springtime, I did both of these panoramas in springtime when the Milky Way is lower down. This just allows you to get more sky in. So maybe if you haven't got a wide lens and you don't want to invest in one yet because you're not quite sure if astrophotography is for you, then you don't have to use a wide lens. You can use maybe a longer focal length lens, you know, maybe something like a 35mm, maybe even a 50mm if you wanted to. And you can take multiple images and you can stitch them together using Photoshop, or I think GIMP does it as well. GIMP does a similar type of thing. It can stitch your panoramas together and does it automatically as well. So it stitches them all together for you. So in these cases here, what I've done is I've actually shot in portrait mode rather than landscape. Traditionally, you always think, oh, let's shoot in landscape because that's kind of the way pictures are. But I really like portrait format with night sky images, because when you shoot in portrait, you get more foregrounds, you get more sky in, okay? So you shoot in portrait with a panorama, and then you just adjust the tripod position, well, not the position, you adjust the tripod head slightly, you move side to side, and you just take one picture after another, and you move the tripod each time you do it. You can actually get special panning heads for your tripod, which have numbers on them, or your tripod may already have that, and you can actually adjust the tripod in correct increments to make sure that the panorama is going to work. And I usually say use about 30% overlap with the images. So don't just move your camera randomly to another patch of sky, work it out and move it so there's about 30% coverage overlap in each of your images. And these two images were taken with 5 shots. If you move to the next slide for me, Martin, I've just put some lines on just to show you what I mean. I've divided it up there in the different shots that I took in portrait. I took these at 24mm, if I remember correctly, and I've just planned it across, took 5 images, and I've merged them together using Photoshop. They're relatively simple to do. They're not too hard, really. Once you've had a little practice and you've taken a few, the first few might not work very well, but eventually you'll get used to it. And if you've got any questions on that, please just ask. And is that everything from me, or is there anything else? Can't quite remember. What's next?
I think there was you were going to say you were going to share some images that had the settings on them. People are still asking about what settings you're using.
Yeah, we have that at the very end with the because we're going to do a bit of a fireside chat thing, but I think Martin was going to do a bit on Aurora as well first.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah.
When's your full Aurora talk, Martin? Is it Friday? Martin, I think you're muted. Oh, I can read lips, but nobody else can, Martin. You are
there
muted, and now you're unmuted. Yeah.
You can hear me now.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
just a few slides. These 3 or 4 slides, which are actually in my Aurora talk we're doing on Friday. So you want decent sources of information for when the Aurora is likely to be visible. And again, it goes back to planning. Find somewhere where you think you're going to have a nice clear view to the north. So, for example, anyone familiar with the Northumberland coast, this is the little lighthouse at Bamborough that looks as though it's always startled. Probably the best Facebook group for knowing when the Aurora is happening is AUK, or Aurora UK. And the Glendale app is very, very good because it tracks substorms in real time. This is the one certainly that all of our astronomers at the Battlesteads are using now. We use very little else other than that, and avoid anything that uses KP index. And when you photograph the Aurora, it'll change a lot depending on what sort of moonlight you've got, what sort of cloud cover you've got. So the top left photograph there, this was the Mother's Day Aurora in 2016. The supermoon shot over on the top right, that was 10:30 at night in early December. And the moon was that bright, the beach was just illuminated. And depending on what sort of activity you've got and what sort of settings you're using in your camera, you might just record a glow, you might see arcs, you might see rays. Again, that bottom right-hand picture is the Mother's Day Aurora in 2016, where there was a lot of structure and a lot of movement. And then we've just got a little bit on processing and Using the histogram, this is screenshots from Lightroom. So the histogram is this thing over on the top right of each of these screenshots. And it basically shows the left-hand side are pixels that are recorded black. The right-hand side is pixels that are recording white. And then all of the tones in between. And this particular histogram, you also have different colors within the histogram. So it's showing you how much you've got of each tone in there. And histograms of nighttime shots will usually be stacked somewhere towards the left. And certainly once you've processed them and you've darkened the sky a bit, your histogram will be over on the left-hand side. These are both exactly the same photograph. And when me and Dan were talking about this the other day, we thought something that's really important to talk about is white balance. And that affects quite dramatically the overall color tone of your image. So the one on the left here, this is the church up at West Kirk Newton in the College Valley. There was some low cloud, there's a bit of light pollution. It's a very, very orangey looking image. So the one on the right, I've then taken the white balance down. I think I can't see because the little thing with me and Dan in it is in the way. So that's all the way down at 3,250, which is very low. What it's done, it's made the sky very blue, but it's taken out quite a lot of the glaring light pollution that you've got there. It's very subjective. Some people like the skies quite blue in their photographs. Some prefer them with a slightly warmer tone, like the one on the left there. Don't do anything overly dramatic. Just look at different white balances, see what you think works for you, what you prefer. At the end of the day, they're your images. The only person that has to be pleased with them really is you. And then this processing slide shows, this is one from the Mother's Day Aurora, again in 2016. So the final processed image is this one up in the top left. What we've got in the left-hand side of this here is exactly what the camera recorded. That's before any editing was done to it at all. So you can't see very many stars in the sky there. You can see the green of the aurora. You can't see much other than that green. And overall, the left-hand side of that looks really, really quite murky. On the right-hand side, this is what it looks processed compared to the original. And the processing I've done there, I did some noise reduction. It was quite a noisy photograph. Noise reduction's not always too much of a problem in nighttime photographs. It'll make the sky look slightly smoother, but it's not always as dramatic as it is if you do in a daytime photograph and you're trying to get rid of noise. What I would say when you're processing images is try not to make huge global changes to the whole image. It's unlikely you will want to do exactly the same thing to every single bit of the image. And if any of you are using Lightroom, the adjustment brushes in Lightroom are very, very good for working on local adjustments inside an image. Lightroom also has range masking. So if you only want to work on the highlights or the shadows in a particular part of the image, you can set that range mask. So whatever you're doing in that bit of the image only affects the luminosity values that you actually want to affect. I used to do lots of editing, doing big global changes, and quickly I now spend quite a lot of time editing images and working on very small local areas of photographs. As Roy was saying, there have been a few people who have requested what sort of settings we're using when we take these photographs. We've got half a dozen or so images here where we've actually included those settings.
My turn?
It is your turn, Dan.
Well, we thought we'd do this bit at the end, really, before we take questions, just a little bit of a casual chat. to maybe encourage questions as well, and just talk about what we did and the techniques we used for some of our images. And I'm going to start with this one from the Lake District at Buttermere. And this is when Mars was well positioned last year. And you can see Mars in the sky, and you can also see its reflection in the water. And really, I just picked this one just because it kind of covers a few different things. It covers imaging planets, and it covers imaging or planning your images as well. And I did plan this because I knew there's a body of water there, and I wanted to get the reflection of the stars. So using bodies of water is a really good thing to do as well, to get those reflections. And again, I'm going back to my fog filter here. This patch of the sky where Mars was back then, this is in Pisces and Aries, I can see there as well. So that patch of sky is not that prominent, because there's a lot of faintish stars there. So I thought by using the fog filter would really enhance some of the stars, and Mars especially, and it really enhances that orange color of Mars. This is not proper planetary photography. Planetary photography is a completely different thing, but imaging the planets wide field is quite cool as well. So this is a fairly wide field view of 24mm. And you can see how I said I really like that portrait shot as well. I really enjoy the portrait format because I'm fitting more sky in, I'm fitting more of the water in, and I'm capturing that reflection as well. And also, I always think that portrait format images are really good on Instagram because they come up much nicer than landscape one. Hence why I shoot in portrait quite a lot. But I think, you know, I do like the effect of that. You can see my settings there, 13 seconds at 24mm. You know, 24mm is relatively wide. It depends on how picky you are with your sausage stars, really. I don't really like going over 13 seconds of 24mm because it annoys me too much. I get too many star trails. That's why I've got the f-stop right down to f1.4, and the ISO is relatively high as well. At 4000 ISO, there's a little bit of noise. It depends on what camera you use, really. This is taken on the Sony. It was taken on Sony Alpha 7 III. And the noise levels are pretty good on that in low light, so it wasn't too bad at ISO 4000. And Martin, I think you're next.
Yeah, so this one was part of a time-lapse sequence that I was shooting. When I'm up at the observatory at the Battlesteads, I tend to just choose a bit of sky and put the observatory somewhere in the foreground. That's using a 14mm lens, so that's my 14 to 24mm lens at its widest end. You tend to get a little bit of distortion of verticals using that lens, which is generally typical with all very wide angle lenses. And we were actually training some of our assistant astronomers that night. So we'd got people on the observing area throughout. So I knew that at some point I would probably capture an image that had got me and or one of our other astronomers in it. It was quite an extraordinary night. We have red light around the observatories, as you can see here, is the same they do at most observatories, because red light doesn't impact your night vision. The sky itself, there was no real visible light pollution that night. So all of the images came out looking very, very similar to this. I frequently just find somewhere, often while it's still daylight, get my composition set up, get my camera on my tripod, and then just let it do its own thing for a few hours.
Excellent. Well, I included this one because this one was taken from Sycamore Gap only 3 nights ago. So I know that some of you saw the one I took, which was on the example of GIMP earlier on in the last session. And I took this literally about 2 minutes afterwards. I just pointed it towards the western sky. And I did this on purpose because there's quite a cool phenomena this time of year. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to mention this because not a lot of people do look for this. And it's something known as the zodiacal light. And if you look towards the left-hand side of my image, there's a cone shape of light. It's also behind me as well. There's a cone shape of light emanating from the hill. And that is the zodiacal light. That is not something in our atmosphere. That is actual dust in the solar system. So it's interplanetary dust. It's bits of dust that's left over from the formation of the planets. And that dust at certain times of year can be seen, usually around the equinoxes. So we see it February, March, April time-ish is a good time to pick this up. If you watch the western sky after sunset, just as it's starting to get dark enough, if you're in a dark sky site, you can pick out that lovely glow. It's very subtle, and you do have to train your eye to look for it. But if you spot it, it's something really, really cool, because not many people get to see the zodiacal light. And you will be there, and I did see it just about with the naked eye, but the camera picked it out quite easily. Hopefully you can all see what I'm talking about, but that's not light pollution. It is actually interplanetary dust, which has been illuminated by sunlight, which I think is fantastic. And I've even got the Milky Way on the other side. And also, if you look right in the middle, that little smudge is the Andromeda Galaxy. So we can see dust in our solar system, we can see the Milky Way, and we can see another galaxy 2.5 million light years away. And I think when you're planning your shots, think about these sorts of things. You know, think about what kind of stories you could make from the images, if you like. And I think it's a really cool thing to do, as demonstrated in that picture there. And I hope you like it.
Right, so I talked a lot about planning earlier, and this is an example of a shot that wasn't planned. I was actually working on a commission shooting Holy Island in the daytime, and it was cloudy. It was broken cloud, but there was a lot of it. And as it got to dusk, I was doing my last few shots, and I realized that the cloud was starting to clear. And I figured that as the cloud was starting to clear, I was going to stay on the island and see what the sky looked like. I'm actually out on the mudflats there. The road back to the mainland, you can see it coming across here. I'm actually out on the mudflats with the tide starting to rise around me. When you're planning, check tide times. Don't wade out into mudflats when the tide's coming up. That's not good. The Milky Way was, I mean, it was almost as clear as that naked eye as well. And this was late September. It was rising almost vertically out of the western horizon. And I thought, I'll just put this straight in the middle of the photograph, and I'll use these channels in the mudflat as slightly lighter leading lines to take the eye into the frame and look up at the Milky Way.
A couple of quick questions about light pollution filters or removing light pollution in post-processing. What are your thoughts, just quickly?
Do you want to do it, Martin, or me?
If it's the old orange sodium discharge lamps, do it in processing. And LED lights are, well, they're a menace. They're good for visual astronomy. They're not great if you're getting light pollution from like broad spectrum LED lighting.
Yeah. Are these ones at the minute that you're showing here? I mean, obviously this one isn't, but the 2 or 3 previous pictures you've shown, are they single shots or stacked?
They're all single shots. Well, mine are all single shots, yes.
All of mine are single shots.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
Fantastic. So this one here is clearly not 30 seconds. I just put 30 seconds in because that's how long the exposures were to make the star trail. I probably didn't need to put this one in because we did touch on star trails earlier on. But the reason I did put this one in was because I wanted to demonstrate that effect that you get when the moon's out. So I purposely took this on a farm in Wales, actually, a farm in South Wales. And this was on a night when there was a kind of a half moon. The half moon was out and it was setting as I started to take this image. There was just enough moonlight.
There's still a lot of stars there.
Well, yeah, because the moon was only kind of half out in a way. It was on its way down, so the moon wasn't really dominant, but it did illuminate the foreground nicely, and that's what I like about this. Because it's illuminated the cowshed, it means that I haven't had to over-process the cowshed in post-processing. Because if it was on a moonless night, that cowshed would have been pretty dark, and I would have had to increase the shadows quite a lot. I'd have had to try and bring out detail from the shadows. And when you do that, the image gets quite noisy. So it's about using the moonlight to your advantage. And I purposely did that night. I did it as the moon was setting. So I had enough light to illuminate the foreground. And as the moon went down, more stars began to appear.
And Dan, or Martin, either of you really, do you ever use a torch just to maybe light paint the foreground?
Sometimes, yeah. Torches are good for light painting. I'm not a huge fan of using them because I don't like the irregular lighting that you get. You often get like some parts of the image might be lit and some parts might not be. I quite like that moonlight naturally lights it up for you and it gives it more of an even brightness. But it depends on what you're doing. You can be creative with light painting. If you want to shine a torch into the sky, a lot of people do that and you get a nice beam of light. So it depends really.
I think that's really cheesy.
It is.
So, you know.
Well, to be honest, if you look at most of my selfies, they're all really cheesy, right?
Yeah, but at least you're not shining a light up into the sky.
Cliche astrophotography selfies.
It is. I'll do it. Trust me. When I get kind of going with this Sony thing, I will do that at some point.
I guess the most important thing to remember is just have fun when you do it. That is the most important thing, right? Do whatever you want. It doesn't matter what other people think. Just do it.
Exactly.
Do the cliche shots. I mean, dear me, I've done Sycamore Gap many times.
Yeah, but people love that, as can be seen by your social media. So, you've got to give people what they love, haven't you?
And that brings us on to our final shot.
Look at that, over the pond.
Comet Neowise and Noctilucent Cloud over the pond at the Battlesteads Observatory. Unfortunately, I couldn't get into a position where I could get the reflection of Neowise in the pond.
Yeah.
I'm going to say disappointing. We probably won't see another comet like this in my lifetime.
Well, you're really old though, aren't you? So I think me and Dan still have a chance.
Yeah, I'm not much older than you are.
No, I think, are you younger than me, actually? I think you might actually. I'm just being cheeky.
So no, I just look younger than you.
I'm terrified. I'm 30 on the 8th of March. So there you go.
Oh dear. Well, I think the good thing about that as well is that was in the summer, kind of the early spring, late summer. Late spring, early summer. So I'm assuming that you, there you go, the light, the ISO settings and so on didn't have to be too severe.
No, I think it was, when was that? That was July, I think.
That looks June, July, because it was at this for a long time, that comet, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was when we first reopened the observatory after lockdown.
Yeah. So can I share 3 or 4 of my mobile phone pictures now, just so that people can see what's going on? Oh, look at those. Oh my God, you've got the navigation lights of the aircraft, red and green and red and green.
Yeah, and the Aurora.
Yeah, I love it. And your famous yellow and black bobbly hat.
Is that a selfie, Martin? A selfie?
That is a selfie.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one with Martin where he shone the torch up in the sky. Yeah.
No, that's too cliched.
It is. But it's fun.
I'll stop my screen share.
I'll try and do mine. I mean, basically, because we had questions about mobile phones and what you can achieve with mobile phones, and I am quite the massive fan of the Huawei phones. So I thought what I'd try and do. Can you see my picture of the Noctilucent clouds there?
Yeah.
I know you can, but can the people? I think that's working. So, were you there, Martin, on the summer solstice in 2019 where we had this huge display? Because I know it was a night when I was there. Jimmy was there, and it was this beautiful noctilucent. It went on for 2 hours, and it covered the whole sky. It was amazing. Martin's muted himself. Did you see that, Dan? It was the summer solstice 2 years ago, 2019.
I think so. Yeah, I mean my memory's not the best for dates and things, but we've had some really good Noctilucent clouds over the summer. Last summer wasn't as good, but
but the one before was amazing.
Some really good Noctilucent clouds.
So this is the pond out the back of the observatory, and this was just before midnight actually. And that was taken with my mobile phone, and I think that might have even been handheld, that one. And then a few nights later, oh, there we go, that's better. Or is it? Then a few nights later in Gateshead, where I live, that happened. So that's, again, I took that from the overpass on the A167, the old what used to be the A1. And even with light pollution, the noctilucent clouds really jump out, actually. But there's my fuzzy comet Neowise. So, I mean, obviously your pictures with your DSLRs are absolutely crystal clear and amazing. But again, it's just to encourage people to get out there and play with the pro settings on their phone, bung the phone on a tripod and just see what you can come up with. And when you look at that on a mobile phone screen, which is teeny tiny, you can't see that it's out of focus and looks great. So that's good.
And on that note as well, Roy, it's really good to, if you are practicing with your phone, I've noticed all your images are taken kind of during twilight.
Yeah.
So it is quite a good time to play with the phone, really, because the phone will pick up more light, and you can still see you picked up stars, even though there's still quite a bit of twilight there. So maybe it's good to use phones.
Yeah,
and you can get some really good results, especially when the sky's still quite light.
Yeah. So that's the picture that I think that's one of Jimmy's actually. He had a, what did he have? That was a Pixel 3, I think. But this is me using my star trail setting to catch the ISS. So you can see the stars are starting to trail there. That must have been about a minute or two. And there's another satellite caught there. And then I saw that, so that was in my back garden in Gateshead, and I thought, that's really good. I wonder what happens if I leave it out for longer. And I got that. So that was in my mobile phone, the Huawei, on the star trail setting, pointed at the North Pole star for ages. That must have been out there for an hour or two. I can't even remember. Picked up a few satellites, a couple of blinking satellites as well on the left, and a couple of aeroplanes as well on the right. And you see the foreground. I'm sure it's doing that thing that the Olympus is doing. It looks very similar. But this was the one that blew my mind. So there was a really cold night when the Aurora was kicking off, and up north in Scotland. And actually, I'd been to Sycamore Gap prior to taking this picture. And this is the sill. This is where Twice Brewed is, just behind the sill. And I'd been up at Sycamore Gap for half an hour trying to take pictures of what I thought was the Aurora, because I was seeing pictures on a Facebook group where people were saying, we're at Sycamore Gap right now, and this is what we're seeing. And I was standing there on the road looking at Sycamore Gap with my camera, and it wasn't there. So I don't know what they were seeing, but it wasn't the Aurora. So I gave up and I took my phone to the, on its tripod and took that. And that was a 20-second exposure on a reasonably high ISO. And I was stunned that A, some of the stars had color, and B, look up there in the top left, that's Andromeda. 2.5 million light years away, taken with your mobile phone.
Cool, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm hoping people will take away from both this and the previous session is that whatever you've got, whether you've got a 50 quid DSLR, a £2,000 DSLR, or a mobile phone, you need to get yourself some kind of little tripod or stand or whatever, put it in the pro settings, or take your camera off that green auto mode and just start experimenting. I think that's got to be the takeaway from tonight, isn't it?
Definitely.
Martin, you're muted.
I'm back now.
You're back. We still have 200 people in the live stream. A couple of people are thanking us, and people are thanking you. Thank you very much. Lots of compliments on your images and the advice. Rob White says, Martin, I'm sure you're the bloke I bumped into the bathing house near Howick a few months ago, and you pointed out a pod of bottlenose dolphins. And I'm going to say, Rob, that is highly likely, because
that was me. Yes.
One of the other things that Martin does, we are so lucky to have Dr. Kitchen as on the team at the observatory. But prior to that, and concurrently, Martin is a fantastic. Is it naturalist? Not the one where you're naked, the one where you know a lot about animals and stuff.
Seriously, nobody wants me to be a naturalist.
Thank you. And
naturalist. Yeah.
Martin does a lot of stuff out on the North Sea with boats and tours with dolphins and things like that. And I wholeheartedly recommend that you have a look for that Northern Experience Wildlife Tours. I've done it myself, and although we didn't see any dolphins, we actually had it was a beautiful day out on the sea, seeing all kinds of wildlife. And by the look of your pictures and videos, Martin, that was the only time there were no dolphins. So thank you for arranging that for me. Yeah, lots of thanks, folks. I don't think we have any more questions, but we're going to hang around for 5 more minutes just in case.
Yeah, I was looking forward to the questions. Yeah. Have you got any questions?
Well, I think what's been happening is Rachel and Larry and Chris have been answering those questions really well within the chat. Rob says, thank you for the dolphin pod spotting. He wouldn't have seen it had you not been there. A couple of people are saying they're going to keep an eye on the Battlesteads and book for the Nightscape courses. Mm-hmm. So they will be on the calendar as Nightscape courses. They're not in there at the minute because, you know, I mean, I'd love to spend time putting loads of events in the calendar, but we just don't know when we're going to be back. So keep checking. Yeah, no, that's it. I think lots of thanks. The Milky Way shots, was that processed in full Photoshop? Does that mean anything to you two?
You mean Photoshop?
I think it might mean Photoshop.
All of mine were processed in Lightroom.
Lightroom. Dan?
Mine are a combination.
Okay, so Amanda Robinson asks Dan if you ever do private lessons. So I think he does, probably, if you wanted to ask him. I'm happy to act as an agent with a 10% commission. No, I think that your starting point there, Amanda, is that all of the observatories, and so Dan works for Kielder Observatory and Martin works with me up at Battlesteads. We all do astrophotography courses. So if you want to learn from Dan, then you go to Kielder. If you want to learn from Martin, come to see us. And you know what? Why not try both? Because you're always going to get slightly different advice from different people, and you just never know what you're going to pick up. Someone has asked, are the chats available recorded? They are. So this is the Astro Ventures YouTube stream. There is one playlist for all of the talks for the Northumberland Dark Sky Festival, certainly that we're hosting anyway. I know a couple of the other observatories are hosting theirs on Facebook. So if you want to see the Twice Brewed ones, you go to the Twice. Now, I don't know, actually, it might be the Twice Brewed Facebook page, or it might be the Will Photography page. But if you need to know, let us know. But all the talks that we're hosting are here on this playlist, including the one that we did earlier tonight. And that's great because it means you can play them back and you can pause them and make notes and re-record and jump around. So that's good as well.
In regards to astrophotography sessions at Kielder, just so you're aware, we do normally do one once a month on a Sunday. That's normally when we do them, when we do astrophotography sessions. Yeah. In regards to one-on-one sessions, it is something that we're going to be look to doing online because we are going to be building our online presence a little bit more and offering more online.
Yeah. And
eventually, I don't know when, but eventually we will probably offer one-to-one courses. You know, whether it's over Zoom or what have you, depending on the pandemic situation. But it is something that we probably will offer eventually. But I just don't know when it's going to happen yet.
No, I mean, we don't. That's the thing, isn't it? I must say, what I would like to do, Dan, is I know that Martin and Chris run their astrophotography sessions. We do them once a quarter, I think, on Sundays as well. So let's make sure that we don't run our events on the same Sunday. Let's give people the opportunity to go to both if they want to. Let's coordinate with that.
Good idea.
And just to reiterate to somebody else that, yes, these talks are all available on our YouTube channel again. As soon as we finish the live stream, they become available. Do you focus stack hyperfocal calculation? Does that mean anything to either of you two?
Yes, but I don't do it.
Yes, but I don't do it.
There you go, Edward. Edward Bayliss, your question's answered immediately and very succinctly.
I'll go into that a little bit more though, because it depends on what you're shooting really. So if you want to do, so if your foreground subject, let's say you're shooting a tree or a rock or something in the foreground, and if it's very close to your lens, then if you want that rock to be in focus, the star's going to be out of focus. And if you want the whole image to be in focus, then you have to focus stack. So you'd have to take images, you'd have to focus your lens to different depths of the field. So you'd focus it on the stars, you'd focus it in the mid-range, you'd focus on the foreground, and then you would layer those images as a focus stack. You can do that, but usually with a wide field lens, a wide angle lens, usually most things are reasonably in focus. If your stars are in focus, usually your foreground is far enough away for it to be in focus as well, reasonably. But if you're really picky and you want everything to be perfectly in focus, then you can focus stack. But it becomes a little bit more complicated and it takes a little bit more effort.
We're actually getting questions now, gentlemen. Any recommendations on dew heaters? And I must say, I mean, if you don't mind putting money in Bezos's pockets, go to Amazon and just type in DSLR dew heater lens, DSLR lens heater, and there's dozens of them for about 20 quid, and they're all the same things. But also, don't forget the old hand warmer in a sock. Hand warmer in a sock, much cheaper, never runs out of batteries. Would you monthly and one-on-one sessions benefit international photographers? Well, Caroline, as Dan was saying, we are, and actually Kielder, we are also looking at doing our online stuff. But I must say, actually, having both of you on and having you both bounce your ideas off each other, that seems to have worked well. So maybe we should do this a bit more regularly. See you on Friday for your Aurora talk. That's great. That's good as well. So Edward Bayliss, your answer on the question on focusing, I think, was just answered there. Ian McDonald, questions, you can fire your questions away now, Ian, if you think the questions have been missed. We're going to be around for a few more minutes. John Rain, and I'm gonna fire this question as I think this is how I imagine him sitting there. So, star tracking, how does it work? Dan?
How does it work?
Yeah,
well,
it's magic, sorcery.
Magic. Lots of sort of like things and bits and bobs that move. Now, so star tracking is basically, a star tracker is a device that you put on top of your tripod. It goes in between your tripod and your camera, and it simply moves at the same rate as what the stars move around the sky.
Yeah.
So it adjusts your camera position to follow the stars. They do have to be polar aligned, so you have to align them to the North Star.
Yeah.
And then once it's polar aligned, you can point your camera in any direction, and the star tracker will adjust the position of your camera to follow the stars.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as
Chris had also suggested that if anybody has a motorized EQ mount for the telescope, you can use that. You can set your camera up on that. That's absolutely fine.
Absolutely,
it's just they're not that portable, are the old big EQ5s and EQ6s.
Well, what some people do, which is quite good, and you can buy attachments for the top of your telescope, so you can
you can piggyback it, can't you?
And you can mount your camera with a lens on top of your telescope, so you can image a deep sky object whilst taking a wide field view of the sky at the same time. So it's quite a good thing to do. Sometimes when you do that, you might end up getting issues with balancing and things, especially if you've got a heavy camera or you've got a heavy lens, but you have to make sure that it's all balanced so it works correctly as well. But
John has said thank you for that. Now, this question has been asked twice. Do you do, or will we do, any in-depth processing sessions? And I think, Martin, the answer to that's going to be yes. I do know that both us and Kielder, I can't speak for Twice Brood and Stonehoff. They're relatively new in terms of how they've established what they're doing, but I don't see any reason why either of them couldn't do that. They both do astrophotography, but I do know that we and Kielder do in-depth, full day or sometimes even whole weekend residential astrophotography and processing sessions. And I think maybe we need to look at kind of extending our online offering there to you folks as well, because some of you are all over the world and we can't really travel right now, which is a pain. So yeah, I think that's it. Edward Bayliss, I think we answered your question about stacking hyperfocal, foreground, background. Would we use a flash? Jenny Perry, would we use a flash at any point for lighting foreground? And that was answered by Dan and Martin in the talk, which is that you can get really variable results when using a flash or a torch, and often they just like to use the moon for that. I've got an EQ2 motorized mount. Is that just too useless?
Oh.
Yes or no?
Depends what telescope you've got on it.
Yeah.
If you've got a 16-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain on it, then yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing about that is really Ian McDonald. It's about what kind of the weight of the equipment that you're putting on that. So star trackers and tripods have the same thing. If you are going to go buy a tripod, I know a lot of people in the last talk were talking about buying cheap tripods. Often they only have a 2 kilogram like weight limit, and you need 5 really if you've got a decent sized camera, and especially if you've got a star tracker on there as well. Although Chris has said that will work fine. So I think just for a camera, I think Chris is right. If you're just going to put a camera on that, then yes, it'll work fine.
Yeah.
Eclipse in June. There's an eclipse in June. Any filter advice for the eclipse?
It's have we got is it a partial? I
don't know. I can't remember. I've got an app on my phone. I can quickly check. It's too late for these kinds of questions.
I have checked this, but I can't remember when it is. I have jotted it down somewhere. But if it is, it'll be a partial eclipse, because I would definitely know about it if it was a total eclipse.
Annual solar eclipse, June 2021.
If I remember correctly, I think we see a part of it. I think we only see a small part of it from Europe.
Tiny, and we're getting, it looks like less than 50%, although that looks like in the north of Scotland. Would that be a neutral density filter for that then, or would you actually just go straight to buy a piece of solar filter paper from who is it does the A4 sheets of solar filter paper?
Yeah, I would Barda.
So I love that stuff. That's amazing stuff.
I would personally use Barda solar film. If you do use a neutral density filter, you can image the sun with a neutral density filter. It'll stop your lens down by like 10 stops or something, depending on the strength of it. I have imaged the sun before with an ND filter. It was like the shortest exposure like camera does. It was like 1/4000th of a second, and it was like f20 or something, and it was it had an ND filter on it. And you can image the disk of the sun by doing it. The only thing I'd say is don't look at the sun with an ND filter on. Do not do that. You know, you can image the sun without solar film, but do not look through your viewfinder, because an ND filter will not protect your eyes. It's not.
No, it really wouldn't. Now, I have actually posted a link in the chat to Tring Astronomy Centre. They're our absolute favourite astronomy suppliers, family-owned business, wonderful people. Neil and Jane, if you've got any questions, give them a ring. And I've posted a link to the page where you can buy solar filters, or you can just buy a sheet of A4 solar filter paper, which you can then cut out and stick over your camera or on a bit of cardboard or whatever. And I love them. Question from Mike Morley. Is that the Mike Morley from Northumberland who knows Paul Sutherland, by the way, Mike? Moon pics. Can you expose to get detail in the moon, but also in a night landscape in one exposure, or would you have to composite the two? So, you know, I think what he's saying here is, and it depends on the phase of the moon, doesn't it? So you want to get detail on the moon, but you also want to get stars and landscape, picture or a composite?
The luminosity of the moon is just so high that you're typically using short exposures when you're photographing the moon if you want detail, and you would be lucky to take a very short exposure of the moon and then get the sort of detail you're looking for in the landscape.
Yeah.
The moon's a menace.
I love it. It's my favorite thing to look at, actually. It's my favorite thing to observe. A couple of people are talking about the Glendale app for the Aurora, so that's great. Polarizing filters. Any use for those in astrophotography?
That's yours, that, Martin.
I'm going to say no, because I mean, apart from anything else, your polarizer will cut out light that's plain polarized in one direction.
Yeah.
You're
Now,
cutting out light that you actually want to be getting to the sensor.
yeah.
They also cut down the overall amount of light reaching the sensor, so you're then going to have this problem of trying to get the right balance for your exposure again.
Yeah.
I've never considered using a polarizer at night.
No, I tell you, from what I know about the physics of polarization, I can't think of any reason where it would crop up where that would be useful, except if you are taking pictures of the moon through a telescope, or looking at the moon through a telescope, you can get filters that involve two polarizing filters, one on top of the other. And as you twist the polarizing filters, you can adjust the amount of filtering that the moon is exposed to. So if you line them up completely, then obviously it goes pitch black and you can barely see anything. If you have them at right angles, then all of the light comes through. So it allows you to basically adjust the amount of light that you get through onto the through the eyepiece. But I'm thinking that's really more for visual, because my guess is that you can achieve the same thing through playing with camera settings on the camera.
Yeah.
Or using an ND filter.
Yeah. So double polarization filter, great for observing the moon visually, but not really for anything else. Okay, so if there are any more questions out there, folks, in the we've still got 122 people watching, then please fire them away now. But I'm going to ask you two, if there's anything else you want to add or throw in, or any other pictures you want to share before we say goodnight to everybody.
I say thank you for listening, and hopefully you've had a good time.
Thank you for listening.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Roy.
No, it's been great. I've really enjoyed this, and I would I'd very much like to encourage us all to maybe do this a bit more regularly and not wait till the festival next year. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about something that we love doing, to a group of people who love listening to us talk about it. So, you know, what more could you want? Okay, folks, so with no more questions in the YouTube chat, I think I'm going to end the live stream there, and thank you all for joining us. As I said before, all of these talks are available on our channel, so do please like and subscribe. I'm a YouTuber. If you're a YouTuber, if you say that, don't you? Like and subscribe. We are planning to come back and do something in April to follow up the festival. There's a couple of things that Kielder are doing. And I think we are possibly looking at maybe we could do something like this on a monthly basis. Yes, I'd love to do that as well. So follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, all of us, not just Kielder and the Battlesteads, but Twice Brood and Stonehoff Astronomy as well. This week, for the rest of this week, the other events that we have tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we've got Natasha Lund from Kielder Observatory talking about their mobile phone astrophotography for children and schools. So that's 2 o'clock tomorrow. You can go to Eventbrite and register there if you want updates, or you can just subscribe on the YouTube channel. And that's going to be a cracking talk, which then leads into a whole thing that Kielder Observatory are doing, where they want you to send in your mobile photography pictures, and they're going to be curated into an exhibition. So let's do that. Tomorrow evening, we've got the international author and the author of the Lonely Planet book on dark skies, Valerie Steemack, joining us. On the 17th, we've got a talk from David Hughes on the Great Geordie Space Race, and following that, ex-lead astronomer and from Kielder and super Kielder astronomer and guru right from the early days of Kielder, David Newton, talking about the Newell telescope, a telescope that was built almost 150, 200 years ago, and is now actually working in Athens. So that's on the Thursday. Then Friday, we welcome back Dr. Martin Kitchen for the Aurora. Now on Saturday, we have the Astronomer Royal, Lord Martin Rees, who will be delivering a talk about life and travel in space. And then finally, on Sunday, we're going to have a little fireside chat where you can meet me and Dan and a few other astronomers as well, and we're going to be just talking about, you know, our lives in astronomy and what we love and why we're here and why we do it. So please do subscribe to all of the rest of our videos. Whether you want to do that through Eventbrite or YouTube is entirely up to you. And we will see you again soon. Thank you for joining us, and